got out of bed and crossed to the window, hoping she wouldn't step on the robot. She fumbled for the cord that opened the heavy white drapes. 6 floors below, she saw the palms along Sunset thrashing, like dancers miming the final throes of some sci-fi plague. 3:10 on a Wednesday morning, and this wind seemed to have the Strip utterly deserted. Don't think, she advised herself. Minutes later, having done the best she could with all that had never been quite right, she descended to the lobby in a Philippe Starck elevator, determined to pay its particulars as little attention as possible. She had once read an article about Starck that said the designer owned an oyster farm where only perfectly square oysters were grown in specially fabricated steel frames. The door slid open on an expanse of pale wood. The platonic ideal of a small oriental carpet was projected across part of this from somewhere overhead, stylized squiggles of light recalling slightly less stylized squiggles of dyed wool, originally intended, she remembered having been told, to avoid offending Allah. She crossed this quietly, heading for the entrance doors. As she opened one of these, into the weird moving warmth of the wind, a Mondrian security man was looking at her, one ear Bluetoothed beneath the shaven cliff of a military haircut. He asked her something, but it was swallowed by a sudden downdrafting gust. No, she said, assuming he'd asked if she wanted her car brought up, not that she had one, or if she wanted a cab. There was a cab, she saw, the driver reclining behind the wheel, possibly asleep, dreaming perhaps of the fields of Azerbaijan. She passed it, a weird exuberance rising in her as the wind, so wild and strangely random, surged along Sunset from the direction of Tower Records, like the backdraft from something straining for takeoff. She thought she heard the security man call to her, but then her Adidas found actual unstyled Sunset sidewalk, a pontillist abstract in blackened chewing gum. The monster open-doors statuary of the Mondrian was behind her now, and she was zipping up her hoodie, heading, it felt, not so much in the direction of the Standard as simply outward bound. The air was full of the dry and stinging detritus of the palms. You are, she told herself, crazy, but that seemed for the moment abundantly okay, even though she knew that this was not a salubrious stretch for any woman, particularly alone, nor for any pedestrian this time of the morning. Yet this weather, this moment of anomalous LA climate, seemed to have swept any usual sense of threat aside. The street was as empty as that moment in the film just prior to Godzilla's first footfall. Palms straining, the very air shuddering, and Hollis, now hooded blackly, sheets of newspaper and handouts from clubs tumbled past her ankles. A police car whizzed past, headed in the direction of Tower. Its driver, slumped resolutely behind the wheel, paid her no attention. To serve, she remembered, and protect. The wind reversed giddily, whipping her hood back and performing an instant redo on her hair, which was in need of one anyway, she reminded herself. She found Odile Richard waiting under the Standard's white porte-cochere and the hotel's signs, known only to its designers, upside down. Odile was still on Paris time, but Hollis had offered to accommodate her with this small hour's meeting. Also, evidently, it was optimal for viewing this kind of art. Beside her stood a broad young Latino with shaven head and retro-ethnic burgundy Pendleton, sleeves scissored away above the elbows. The shirt's untucked tails reached nearly to the knees of his baggy chinos. "Hello," he said, beaming, as she walked up to them, raising a silver can of Tecate. There was something tattooed in very bold and ultra-elaborate Old English lettering down the length of his forearm. "Hello," Hollis said. "Hollis," Odile said, dabbing at her nose with a frayed wad of tissue. Odile was the least chic Frenchwoman Hollis could recall having met, although in a kind of haute nerd Euro way that only made her more annoyingly adorable. She wore a black XXXL sweatshirt from some long-dead startup, men's brown ribbed nylon socks of a peculiarly nasty sheen, and see-through plastic sandals the color of cherry cough syrup. Alberto Corrales, he said. Alberto, she said, allowing her hand to be engulfed by his empty hand, dry as wood. Hollis Henry. The curfew, Alberto said, his smile widening. The fan thing, she thought, amazed as ever and just as suddenly ill at ease. This dirt in the air, Odile protested. It is disgusting. Please let us go now to view the piece. Right, said Hollis, grateful for the distraction. This way, Alberto said, neatly lobbing his empty can into a white standard waste container with Milanese pretensions. The wind, she noticed, had died as if on cue. She glanced into the lobby. The reception desk was deserted, the bikini girl terrarium empty and unlit. Then she followed Alberto and the irritably snuffling Odile to Alberto's car, a classic Vaux Beetle gleaming under multiple coats of low-rider lacquer. She saw a volcano flowing with incandescent lava, big busted Latinas in mini loincloths and feathered Aztec headdresses, the polychrome coils of a winged serpent. Alberto was into some kind of ethnic culture jamming, she decided, unless VWs had entered the pantheon since she last looked at this stuff. He opened the passenger side door and held the seat up while Odile slid into the back. Alice, said Odile accusingly, you tell me you are not Smoke. I just started, Hollis said. But we are here, said Alberto, taking a left at Larrabee and parking. Where's here? Hollis asked, cracking the door and preparing, perhaps, to run. Alberto looked grave, but not particularly crazy. I'll get my equipment. I'd like you to experience the piece first. Then, if you like, we can discuss it. He got out. Hollis did too. Larrabee sloped steeply down toward the illuminated flats of the city, comfortable to stand. Alberto helped Odile from the back seat. She propped herself against the Vaux and screwed her hands into the front of her sweatshirt. I am cold, she complained. And it's without the warm blast of the wind. She looked up at a graceless pink hotel that loomed over them while Alberto, draped in his Pendleton, rummaged in the back of the car. He came up with a battered aluminum camera case crisscrossed with black gaffer tape.